Hello everyone and welcome back to Doctor Who Breakdowns. In this episode we'll continue with the Season 1 second story, The Daleks, beginning with the third episode in the serial, The Escape. Spoiler alert. Susan leaves the TARDIS clutching the box of vials, bracing herself for the journey to the oncoming storm, when a stranger immediately confronts her, looking ominously down at her. Surprisingly, Susan doesn't scream, instead sticking to the ground. Trembling, she asks who he is and what he wants.
Don't be afraid.
But despite his lackluster answer, she quickly calms down.
You're perfect.
It looks like Susan's got a crush. I too like me some tall men. Apparently, in Susan's young mind, only ugly mutations are bad. I guess personality is linked with outward appearance. Who knew? Anyway, he apologizes for frightening her yesterday with the shoulder touch and tells her he's here now to explain how the drugs work. As the pieces come together, Susan confesses they hadn't taken the anti-radiation drugs yet, since they didn't know that's what they were. As he leaps down from some rocks with his magnificent cloak, Susan explains that her fellow travelers are prisoners in the city, and that she needs to return with the drugs for them all to be saved and freed. The stranger wonders why the Daleks would need the drugs since their survival means they must have some sort of way to protect themselves from the radiation. He then poses a question we've all been thinking at home.
Are you sure the Daleks want the drugs for your friends and not for themselves?
Only then does Susan's trust in the Daleks begin to waver. But she feels very differently about this handsome gent. Formally introducing himself as Aladdin of the Thalls, he gives her another box full of medicine to hide on her person, in case the Daleks go back on their word. Handing her his cloak as she shivers beside him, he vows to protect her until the edge of the forest. Still, after describing his race as survivors of a final war, he wonders about the Daleks aloud.
If they call us mutations, what must they be like?
After some hours go by, a Dalek reports that Susan is back in the cell, and what appears to be the lead Dalek instructs his troops to keep them alive. They speculate that the girl must have met with the Thalls in the woods, so maybe she can lure the Thalls into the city. Down below, Susan cares for her grandfather as the group waits for the medicine to kick in. She describes her meeting with Aladdin and explains that the Dalek found the spare case, but allowed her to keep it regardless. Despite this, Ian, Barbara, and Susan are very much Team Thal. A perfectly reasonable decision, considering they're not, the ones who are holding them prisoner. As the doctor starts to stir, Susan confesses that she wants to help the Thals.
Can't even help ourselves.
Fair point, Barbara! Still, Susan's been swayed by the supposed mutants' cause, and describes their history as Aladdin had told her. Turns out, the Daleks like story time too! This cements their plan to use the prisoners as bait, marinating them with shows of good faith like blankets and food. While serving breakfast, the waiter requests Susan follow him out. With promises to help their Skaro cohabitants, she's swayed and follows without a fight. The others, however, are suspicious of a big brother in their midst.
How do they know we want to help the Thals?
Apparently, they're unaware of just how advanced security has become in the future. Back in the forest, the tribe of surviving Thals have made their way to Aladdin in the TARDIS, all dressed in designs by the costumer Daphne Dare, who worked with Doctor Who for the first 4 years of its impossibly long existence. Unfortunately, she didn't work on Unearthly Child or the 10th Planet, the second Doctor's debut, so she's not credited with their distinct appearances. After her journeys with the TARDIS, she led a successful international career, designing costumes for prominent theater companies and film. In addition to all that, she's worked on more stories than any other costumer during the classic era, and with her sensibilities, many species, like the Thals and the Vord, who we'll be meeting soon, found life. While some take in the sights of the stranger's vessel in the city in the distance, Aladdin speaks with Nemesis, the Thal leader. If you start to get names confused, it's okay. A lot get thrown in very quickly and sound awfully Shakespearean. More mysterious sounding than Rupert and Tara, I suppose. Anyways, the two wonder how the Daleks would treat them.
They are Daleks.
Ganatus wanders by and speaks the truth. However, Nemesis argues that the Thals themselves have changed over the years, from vicious warriors to pacifist farmers. Diana remembers that they were teachers and scientists.
Perhaps they are the warriors now.
Shame the cynical man is right. Still, Nemesis sees their genius still remains in the city they've created, and suggests they offer an exchange of intelligence. The conversation then moves to the mysterious new third party, whose ship they're all beside now. Nemesis asks Aladdin if he trusts them. He tells him he gave the anti-radiation drugs to the girl to bring back to her captive friends.
Would have been better if you'd given it to a man instead of a girl.
Excuse me?
How old is this young girl?
No longer a child, not yet a woman.
Ah, then perhaps it's safe for you to talk to her, if she's not yet a woman.
Alright, Thalls, I really want to be on your side here, but we gotta stop this. Despite an upset Diana, Aladdin insists they all want the same thing, a new source of food.
We're all working towards the same end.
Now there's a double meaning for you.
Apparently Ganatus is the original Captain Jack, everyone. After some more creeping on Diana, Aladdin tells them all about his agreement with Susan. She will speak to the Daleks and a message from the city will be signed by her hand. If it's not signed Susan, the Daleks are obviously evil. Not a great plan to be honest, but hey, it's something. Back in Dalek HQ, the lead Dalek dictates a letter for Susan to write, offering the Thalls a synthesized food buffet if they help farm the land around the city. While they proofread it, they find something strange.
What is the last word here?
The last word?
Susan, stop that noise!
Susan, sweetheart, what the hell are you doing? She sees and hears Ian, Barbara, and her grandfather chatting away on a monitor behind them, and lets the Daleks know they suspected that they were being watched. Shockingly enough, they don't care if they know. They're the ones with the letter now, after all. Back in the cell after a presumed hushed table read, the group put on a little play. Ian argues they should trust the Thalls more, and the Doctor argues that they should give the Daleks a chance. Tempers rise to physical altercation, and in the scuffle, Susan leaps onto Ian's back and tears the camera down from its moorings. Fortunately, it seems connected to this other camera the Daleks were actually watching them through, and the feed goes dark. However, despite their good spirits and feelings of success, it turns out the Daleks are tough critics.
Do you think it was broken accidentally in their struggle? No, the cable is strong. They have broken it deliberately.
Still, they can't be bothered to move them to a different cell or kill them. Not yet, anyway. Too much effort. After quite a few minutes taking an escape plan, the Doctor observes that the floors are made of metal. Through this line of questioning and a series of epiphanies, they deduce that they must be essential to the Dalek way of life. Their scent is the biggest clue, as it reminds them all of dodgems, or bumper cars in the American vernacular. Yes, I had to Google that. Turns out, they get all their power from the floor, through static electricity. With this new hypothesis in Aladdin's cloak, Ian formulates a plan. While Athal carries the magneton from earlier away, Diana lets Ganatus know about it. Apparently they can use it for power. He heads off to tell his brother Antidus when a parting question strikes a nerve.
Is he still afraid of the dark? Oh, I'm sorry.
My brother isn't afraid of anything.
Turns out, toxic masculinity isn't only a human trait, unfortunately. You can't be brave without being afraid, after all. Anyway, Aladdin asks Timosis what happens if the Daleks refuse help. Timosis replies that either way, the Daleks control their destiny, so it's best not to worry.
I've never struggled against the inevitable. It's a vain occupation. But I should always advise you to examine very closely what you think to be inevitable. It's surprising how often apparent defeat can be turned to victory.
Well, I was gonna protest to this philosophy, but this is a pretty great quote. Soon, someone finds a letter from Susan and hands it to him. Well, this isn't gonna be good. After paying extremely close attention to the waiter Dalek's qualities his next delivery, Ian plans to jam the door open with the broken camera. The Dalek's extremely wide range of view with its eye stalk would be impossible to hide from. While everyone ponders how to solve this problem, Barbara gets a brilliant idea. Asking Susan for her shoes, she scrapes the clods of dirt from the treads and mixes it with the water they were just given. Who says mud can't be useful? A few hours later, everyone's ready for action. Even the Doctor supports this plan, finally showing his hostages a bit of kindness.
Good, very good idea.
Alright, places everyone. Time for an escape. As soon as the door opens, Ian places the camera and rolls casually away before the Dalek can notice. The whole pass off is normal until the door doesn't close. Investigating why, the Dalek is caught off guard by Barbara, smearing his lens with the thickest mud imaginable. In panic, the Dalek spins and shouts, but after a bit of turmoil, Ian and the Doctor force it onto the cloak, cutting off its power completely. Go team! Ian lifts the top, but immediately lowers it, all the joys of success quickly draining from his face. Whatever he saw in there, he didn't like it at all. He instructs Barbara and Susan to keep a lookout, and not wanting to see whatever grossed out the scientist, they agree. With the doctor's help, Ian shoves the base off the cloak and scoops out whatever creature made the shell its home. Ian carefully conceals himself inside, and while the fit is tight, it'll do. They all even have a bit of fun as he tries to get the voice right.
Oh, can't you sound more like a Dalek?
Yes, in a monotone. You've heard them.
Do you mean that?
That's it.
Unfortunately, Ian hasn't gotten a handle of the controls yet, which is fair, I suppose, considering he didn't live in an era of elaborate remote controls. The doctor resolves to push from behind as the two women stand in front as captives. While they proceed down the hall, it seems their cell isn't completely devoid of life yet. Now, I've got a genuine question for you all. When you first saw this glimpse of an actual Dalek, the first in the Doctor's personal timeline, did you see a claw or the tentacles? I always saw the tentacles, and I wonder if that's because I saw a latter version before I saw this one. I mean, I know it's the claw now, but I still think it's interesting how prior experiences influence what you see. Anyway, enough psychology. On to part 4, the ambush. Whose ambush? Well, we'll find out soon enough. As they wander further through the hallways, Ian finally gets a handle of the armor controls, allowing the Doctor to take his place in front with the other prisoners. Susan scouts ahead, reporting back on an elevator guarded by a Dalek. Still, with Ian in disguise, they march forward. The Dalek stops them, of course, but Dalek Ian tells it he's bringing them to see the Council for questioning. Having never heard of this, the Dalek turns to the communicators to discover if this is true. On the verge of their escape's discovery, Susan panics and screams, causing a diversion. Clever girl. Seeing the prisoners' fear and resistance, the Dalek is convinced, and assists Dalek Ian into getting them all inside the lift. The Dalek offers to assist, but Dalek Ian insists that no one can escape stuck in a lift. As soon as the door is closed, the Doctor unplugs it, and all commend Susan for her quick-thinking brilliance. Now all on their own, they try to free Ian from his armor, but the clasp is stuck. Apparently, the hinges haven't seen some action in a while. After talking with the council outside, the Dalek realizes he messed up bad, when he's told to hold them because the questioning order wasn't real and can't get the door open. And cue the alarms. Team TARDIS free the clasp, but it's still stuck. Ian shoves against the dome from the inside, which seems like an excellent fan art idea. While they make no progress, Susan jumps when the Daleks on the other side of the door start burning it away, something they continue to enjoy doing to this day. The Doctor suddenly realizes why the lid of this pepper shaker is stuck. The floor has been magnetized to keep him in place. Oh no! Ian then, of course, does the hero thing, telling everyone else to flee. Susan and Barbara are more hesitant than the Doctor, but he manages to pull them all into the lift, promising Ian that he'll send it back down for him later. Without any kind of door closing, the elevator takes off. When they're safe up above, as promised, they send it back down, praying with its agonizingly slow speed that it'll make it to Ian in time. A moment later, the door crumbles down, and the Daleks blow the rogue armor to kingdom come. However, it seems to be empty now as it crumbles away in this incredible shot we'll love eternally. Even when the Daleks emergency call the elevator back down to their floor, Ian climbs out and embraces Barbara, thrilled to have reached the top with breath still in his lungs. With everyone having successfully survived the first stage of escape, they look at a nearby window to see just how far that forest is. Unfortunately, they spot something emerging from the dead trees.
There's someone down there.
Susan then realizes the impact of her earlier stupidity.
The Thals! They've come for food supplies.
Walking into an ambush.
They bang and shout out the windows, but no one below notices. Ian decides the room must be soundproofed because obviously that's the only way people thousands of feet away wouldn't have noticed. Unfortunately, they still have their own problems to worry about, since the Dalek is on its way up the lift now to exterminate them all. While the Doctor works on demagnetizing a nearby door, Ian, Barbara, and Susan grab a nearby sculpture. Who knew Daleks enjoyed art? And throw it down the shaft, crushing the lift. See, I told you should have had elevator doors in place. I wish now I could tell you about who worked on the visual effects of this episode, but because it's the BBC in the 60s, who knows? There wasn't an official visual effects designer until season 4. After the four flee the scene, the Thals make their way to the inner walls of the city. Aladdin is still sneaking about, but no one else is bothering. Still, the man's distrustful instincts aren't wrong. Temesis agrees that the voice of the letter was cold, but expresses his belief that friendship grows with time, and that in time, relations between the two once warring species would become warmer. But Aladdin's gut instinct remains unchanged. Still, they need food, Daleks offer food, and so Nemesis is determined to give them a chance. He plans to march in alone with nothing but peace. A wise sentiment.
They'll see that I'm unarmed. There's no better argument against war than that.
Unfortunately, the sentiment isn't shared with the Daleks, who have set up their toilet paper and fruit buffet and now wait in the shadows for their prey. Team TARDIS make it to the edge of the city, free from the sight of Dalek eye stalks. Still, the companions are a little less eager to leave, knowing the Thals are in danger.
The Thals are no concern of ours. We cannot jeopardize our lives getting involved in an affair which is none of our business.
Wow, the Doctor's really changed his tune over a millennium, hasn't he? Ian quickly comes up with a compromise. The three others return to the TARDIS while he stays behind to warn them. Susan wants to stay too, insisting that like wildcats they're all in this together, but Barbara sees his point. One is certainly less difficult to catch than three, especially when he doesn't have the three to worry about. When an alarm blares back at the banquet hall, the Daleks know someone has entered their trap. While it appears multiple Thals have come to the edge of the cage, only one man enters. Running through the halls, Ian makes it to the doorway in time, hiding in its shadow before rushing out. Nemesis makes his plea for cooperation and peace, giving the Daleks all the time they need to make a decision, because the Thal race is used to waiting. Unfortunately, the Daleks have made up their mind a long time ago. Seeing the Daleks emerge from their hiding places as the other Thals are invited closer, Ian shouts his warning. Tactically much later than I would have, but oh well. With their phasers now set to kill, they shoot Nemesis dead on the spot, and narrowly miss their ex-prisoner as he bolts off. The rest of the Thals manage to hide and escape, but their leader is still dead on the table. Aladdin meets up with Ian outside, where he recognizes him immediately.
Well, you were the man who warned us.
Yes, I'm sorry I was late.
Ian, you were only late in speaking up, but whatever. They agree to talk later in safety, away from this horrible place. Zoe from the editing room here. I've watched the last story and this one again since writing and recording the script, and I've realized something. Team TARDIS tried an ambush before. Running in figurative guns blazing and it didn't end well at all. Maybe that's why they took a polar opposite approach here. Because this was the second strategy in a max 5 days of an outnumbered rescue, I'll forgive him a little more for this one. Not completely, just, a bit more. Back by the TARDIS while the Thals wait for a secondary party to return, the Doctor has joined record keeper Dianite in perusing Scarl's complete history. As he studies the stars from her panels, he's filled with optimism. While she heads off to fetch more maps of local galaxies, he's convinced he can find the coordinates the TARDIS needs. Susan's happy her grandfather's finally dropped his curmudgeon attitude for a bit, but Aladdin and Ian worry about noises in the forest. It can't be Daleks since they're city-bound. Fortunately, the lost group returns before they can imagine much worse creatures. Unfortunately, Antidus is wounded. While Susan scampers off for some ointment for his injuries, Ganatus confesses retrieving their leader's body is hopeless. The city is far too well guarded. Aladdin reveals one more casualty to him, and the newly returned Thal formally meets the man who warned them all before more lives were lost. With the former leader dead, Aladdin is leader by default, the best way to become leader. And yet he is still perplexed as how to deal with the Daleks. Ian then shares his poignant observations and opinion.
Your leader, Nemesis.
Yes.
Well, he appealed very sensibly to them. Any reasonable human beings would have responded to him. The Daleks didn't. They obviously think and act and feel in an entirely different way. They just aren't human.
Yes, but why destroy without any apparent thought or reason? That's what I don't understand.
Oh, there's a reason. Explanation might be better. It's stupid and ridiculous, but it's the only one that fits.
What?
A dislike for the unlike.
Looks like we got some space Nazis on our hands. He says they don't necessarily have to fight them, but demand respect by demonstrating strength of their own, so fighting. Dianite is very much against this idea, and all the other members of the pacifist race kinda agree. Ganatus points out that they're not afraid to die, but that's very much not the same thing as being willing to fight for life. Aladdin lands on the side of his people on the matter, leaving Ian disappointed and Barbara perplexed by their lack of drive to physically protect what they are and own now that it's being threatened.
They're not cowards. They don't seem to be afraid. Can pacifism become a human instinct?
Pacifism. Is that it? Pacifism only works when everybody feels the same.
True, but why do you have to be so cynical about it? Barbara then wonders if pacifism is truly in their blood, or just an unchallenged belief become reality. Deep, the Doctor then wanders over with a bit of insight into their dilemma, revealing that the Thals were once mighty warriors, but after the neutronic war that killed most of them, they mutated. Apparently, they mutated so much, they're back to square one. The Daleks, however, never completed the circle to return to their original physiology. The Doctor shows Ian a picture of the original Daleks that we don't see, informing him that pre-mutation they were simply called dolls. With today's history lesson coming to a close, as Susan reports Antidus is doing better, they all march back to the ship to leave this horrid place forever. Susan argues that the Thals aren't so bad before they march a corpse to the recently fallen through the encampment. Eerie. Barbara and Ian still want to help them find their fighting spirit again, but the Doctor insists that their fates are not intertwined, and that they should leave now. Oh, how the tides have turned. Well, it's been a nice trip, guys. We escaped, the Daleks are trapped. Let's all go home.
Oh, by the way, let me have the fluid link, will you? Oh, dear boy, now, please, come along. You know I can't start the ship without it.
Ian?
Fluid link.
You lost it? Ian, you can't have.
No. The Daleks took it from me when they searched me.
Ian, no! Well, it looks like we'll have to go back for it, somehow. Hopefully someone will live to carry us on to the next adventure, but we'll find out soon enough for the breakdown conclusion of this story, The Daleks. Punxsutawn signing off. Alonzi.